Welcome in to the Rockies Insider. I am your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons. And on today's show, of course, we got to preview this Atlanta, Colorado series, figure out what's going on with the Atlanta Braves. It's been a rough one for them, and figure out if their rebuild has been different than some of the others that have gone on in recent years. And maybe this is a page that the Rockies can use for their book. And so I got to talk to a Braves insider, someone from Braves Today, in fact, the wonderful Lindsay Crosby. What's going on today, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Patrick. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I need someone in every city. I need someone that I can rely upon. And I said, this seems like the guy. He checks off all the boxes. And here you are today, before the series opens up, 3-game set, all night games in Atlanta at Truist Park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's when school gets back in, the team tries to avoid doing a midweek day game if they can help it. Obviously, school down here starts in August, and so things like this, where Atlanta has a home series after this, they push to get those 3-night games in a row. And is it frustrating for us sometimes? Yeah, but you know what? It's better for the fans, for attendance, and that's a better environment at nighttime, I think.
And it's like a 7:10 start, I think, right? Or is it 7:20?
It is 7:20. They have a really interesting start time because of traffic, right? I mean, it's Atlanta and traffic. And so all of their games, if at all possible, 7:20 starts. It's some of the later starts for the East Coast that you see. The Phillies games last week were like 6:40. There's a lot of difference in the start times. It's just surprising.
All right, we've already gone to a place I didn't necessarily think we were going to go to, but since we're here, I'm thinking about going to the All-Star game next year. I went in 2023 in Seattle. Mm-hmm. Incredible. Right in our backyard in 2021 in Denver. So I'm already jonesing for missing it this year. Didn't want to go
The
down.
Atlanta one. 21 was supposed to be the Atlanta one. And guys got it. It got moved to you guys. Yeah.
We're definitely not talking about that. But
don't want to get that topic. Why?
Truist Park is like 45 minutes north of the city. What is that like? What should anyone expect? Should they, want to maybe go out to the series now? I don't know if you're deciding to go watch Atlanta, Colorado at the last minute, but if you're going to the All-Star game next year, or you do want to go to a Braves game, what should someone expect if they're flying into Atlanta?
Okay, so the area around the ballpark is the reason they made this move. I think, well, two, really. One was getting the extra property around the ballpark where they could build that mixed-use development, the Battery Atlanta. The team does get revenue from all of the businesses in there. And like as a publicly owned team, Liberty Media owns the Braves. You get to see the financials. It is a legitimate impact on the team's financials to do that. So that's part of the reason they made the move. But then they also, if you look at the map of where the season ticket holders live, a majority of them didn't live in downtown Atlanta or the south side of Atlanta. A majority of them lived on the north side of Atlanta in the urban sprawl up there. And so they made the move to Cobb County to get that property to be closer to the majority of the fan base who would complain about how difficult it was to travel into the city to go watch the games 3 nights in a row. So I think like flying into the Atlanta airport, there's not just public transit all the way to the ballpark, right? You might have to rent a car or Uber or something like that. But when you get up near the Battery, it's a self-contained city. You can do everything you do, entertainment, food, everything up there. And it's a really cool place to hang out. I've gone up there on non-game days. There's just the restaurants, the attractions, things to do. It's a cool place. It's a cool town to come visit. There's a ton of history here, obviously. Whether it's the civil rights movement, whether it, just different bits of history you can do while you're here. I recommend everybody go, if nothing else, to see that eventually this is what the person who owns your team is going to try to build around their ballpark. Because this is the model now. Everybody does this. Tampa Bay Rays are trying to build their mixed-use development around their new ballpark site. Everybody's trying to get this. And so seeing it firsthand and understanding why it's so attractive is definitely something everybody should do at least once in their life.
That's such a great point, because that kind of revenue that comes in is now a part of revenue sharing. So that's outside of what you don't have to share with the lesser thans. We saw that in Colorado when they were renegotiating the lease on Coors Field. Hey, we'll stick around here, but we would like that parking lot across the street. Boom, they build up McGregor Square. And then, the thinking is maybe in another 30 years time, they might start building out way east towards DIA where there's all this land and get closer to the airport, and maybe the Broncos get a new facility. That could be 50 years down the line, but you're right. That's all the stuff that the leagues and the lesser than teams don't really get to touch. It's creative, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a smart decision, very, very perceptive of the Braves to do that. And yes, there were hard feelings by the city of Atlanta itself because they're not technically in Atlanta right now. Your GPS will say you're in Cumberland, Georgia when you go. But I think in the long run, having been to both ballparks, and honestly, the ballparks before that, going to Fulton County Stadium as a kid, I think that this has ultimately been a positive move, both for the business of the Braves and for the fan base of the Braves from an attendance perspective, from an ease to get there, things to do. This has ultimately been a positive for Atlanta making this move. And if you have the opportunity to build a brand new ballpark, I think this is what teams are going to have to do going forward. And we even see it in the minor leagues. We've seen minor league teams build up facilities around new ballparks to try to do the same model in a smaller scale.
Atlanta and Colorado both did not have a game on Labor Day, true of 6 other clubs. For the Rockies, it was their 4th instance of no game on Labor Day. From 2003 to 2005, they didn't play on Labor Day. Technically, nobody played in 1994, so you could add that one to the list. But the Rockies entered Labor Day with the worst record in the National League for the 2nd consecutive season. It also happened in 2014. It also happened in 2005. Lindsay, I'm just curious your thoughts. We love the point of view from some of the folks on the East Coast or just anyone who's not from this market.
Right.
What are your thoughts in general of the Colorado Rockies? When you hear that name, when you hear Colorado Rockies, what comes to mind? What do you think about for this organization?
I think about how tough it is to go play in Coors Field, about how it impacts virtually every part of your team and your fandom. Like fantasy baseball, you don't want to start your pitchers when the team goes to Coors, right? You want to get a Rockies hitter, but you want to start them at home versus on the road. I'm not going to say, I don't want this to sound condescending, so I apologize up front if it's how it comes off.
It won't, trust me.
It's almost, some of the sentiment is almost feeling bad for Rockies fans because of the inherent struggles with having the organization in a ballpark situation like that, where you're at such high elevation. It does impact pitchers. We see some players can't go play there. Kenley Jansen famously skips every series in Colorado because he has a heart condition. So the difficulties with finding pitching, developing pitching, and then what that's done to the organization, combined with, some not great free agent signings and just, not being run as efficiently maybe as they could be. And so in general, it's something where I think baseball fans would want the Rockies to be good. But I think that the kind of assumption is there's a lot of hurdles to climb. Maybe the current owner isn't the right one to get them back to competitiveness, to get them back to being a very, very good team. And then I do think when the Rockies come to visit you, there's always a question of, well, what is this team going to do when they're not at home, right? Like Ezequiel Tovar is batting .266 on the road, but at home, 7 current players on the roster have a better batting average at home than his road .266, which leads the team. And so you don't really know what to expect when they come to you. You don't really know what to expect when you go there. It's just, I don't know, it's uncomfortable, but it's also, you feel a little bit bad about the state of the organization because this you should be better. The Rockies should be better. It's a great city. It's a great fan base, but the organization just hasn't lived up to their end of the deal.
There's been a lot of folks within the organization, and around it in this media market that think that Coors Field can really be an advantage. You have this uncomfortable place, as you point out, for all of those reasons. And so that could be a major advantage that you have that really hasn't been tapped into since the days of the Blake Street Bombers. And you think of all the great players that have come through Colorado. Now you say, 2 Hall of Famers in Larry Walker and Todd Helton. And we know about Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado. And people remember how great Troy Tulowitzki was in his prime, Carlos Gonzalez, and yet only 1 World Series appearance and only 5 postseason appearances in 32 or so seasons. So I think with the purple uniforms, if you did a ranking of teams you like, and every market, okay, my hometown team is number one. The
Right.
Rockies would probably be somewhere in the top 5 because you're like, yeah, they're non-threatening. They've got purple jerseys. We kind of like them. And so in a way, you're right. I think you're dead on. I think every fan base, maybe other than like the Diamondbacks, would be like, you know what? I would love for the Rockies to be really good. And you know what? There are Diamondbacks fans that also love the Rockies too. So you're right. Everyone wants the Rockies to do well.
Non-threatening is exactly what I was thinking about with the Rockies. But like, you're right. I mean, the City Connect jerseys are so cool. The green is so cool. The purple. I mean, the look, the backdrop at the ballpark, the city itself, everything about Colorado is so cool, except for the product on the field. And like, it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that's the biggest thing. It feels like a missed opportunity. It doesn't have to be that way, but it is. And I mean, it's make the Rockies good again, please. Like, I want the Rockies to be good. It's just more fun when they are. But in the meantime, there's individual things to love, like Brenton Doyle and Nolan Jones together, those arms in the outfield. Holy cow, that's tons of fun to watch. And this weekend, we're going to get so many like potential outfield assists this weekend because you've got Doyle as, I think, probably the best defensive center fielder in baseball. You've got Nolan Jones, one of the best outfield arms in baseball. We've got Michael Harris, who is a very good defensive center fielder. He's not at Brenton Doyle's level, but I think he potentially could be close with some good health. Ramon Laureano's got a great arm. Jared Kelenic, if he plays, has a great arm. Like, there's things to like about this, but it's just, I think you're right about, you've had good players and you've had a little bit of success, but it hasn't been sustained. And I think that's what the fan base wants. That's what the team needs. And that's ultimately what baseball needs.
All right. Matthew saying he doesn't want Braves pity, but you know what? Then you went out and you're giving praise to the Colorado Cannons, Nolan Jones and Brenton Doyle, Jordan Beck as well. No slouch. Mm-hmm. So you're right. I think this is going to be a fun series. You know, for Atlanta, I mean, I want to get into their season here just a little bit. You know, they enter at 11 games over 500, 7 games back of the Phillies, and only 1 game up from the Mets for that third and final wild card. And with one of the easier schedules remaining, I think that's helpful. I think only the Dodgers in the National League have a slightly easier schedule. But this has been
the team that doesn't really need it.
No, this has been a strange season for you guys, and I can't imagine what it would be like going into the year, losing your best pitcher, losing one of the true aces of the game in Spencer Strider, mm-hmm. and then pretty soon after that, you lose the reigning MVP in Ronald Acuña Jr., and then it kind of seems to stabilize. Here we are now, and this has been an emotional roller coaster, I imagine, for Braves fans, and you're barely holding on to a postseason spot.
Yeah, and it's something where the injuries have been almost constant all year, and the timing's been really interesting, right? So your opening day lineup, that starting 9 players, has been together on the field for exactly 7 innings this year. Sean Murphy gets hurt in the opener. He misses 2 months with an oblique injury. As soon as he gets, right before he comes back, Ronald Acuña Jr. is out for the season. And the injuries kept going like that. The only 4 players in the opening day lineup who have not missed at least 2 months or will not have missed 2 months by the end of the season, Matt Olson, Marcell Ozuna, Orlando Arcia, Jared Kelenic. All of the other 5, Austin Riley, Michael Harris, Sean Murphy, Ozzy Albies, and Acuña, will all have missed at least 2 months by the time the season is over. And then you mentioned Strider. You got 2 starts from him, and then he did not pitch again this season. And to even be in postseason contention, to me, is amazing. Just completely honest. You went into the season with World Series aspirations from what you did offensively last season, but this is a different roster. You've had to piece it together. 1/3 of your starting lineup is guys who were DFA'd by their previous teams. Whit Merrifield was DFA'd by the Phillies. Ramon Laureano was DFA'd by the Guardians. And Gio Urshela was DFA'd by the Tigers. And you immediately signed him and stuck him in the starting lineup. Like, that's how bad things have been for Atlanta this year. And so this is honestly all kind of bonus. I can't imagine very many teams would still be in a playoff spot in this situation. The equivalent for Philly would be like taking out Kyle Schwarber and taking out Trey Turner and taking out Bryce Harper and Zach Wheeler. And then after 2 months, Harper and Turner come back, but Schwarber never does. Wheeler never does. Where are they? Are they still leading the division? Are they still in a postseason team? This is all kind of house money right now, right? Like the expectations are gone. The goal is just to play as best as you can, make the most of this season. And if it doesn't work out in the postseason, great. We'll try it next year.
That's an interesting perspective. I wouldn't have necessarily guessed that was the outlook. On paper, you go, yeah, you probably should. But again, with an organization that has such a winning track record, you would think there's some push. And it's funny, you mentioned all the waiver wire, acquisitions. It's kind of got me thinking. And, before this year, you have all these guys that are signed to these long-term deals, all these extensions, and you go, man, now you've got this core that's going to play together for a while. It's going to give you a lot of bites at the apple. But the flip side is, in a season like this in 2024, when a couple of them go down and get hurt, you don't really have an opportunity to do much because the farm system has already taken a hit because of some of the guys you've acquired, and you are scraping by. Do you think, some fans or front office people are re-examining this concept of, keeping a core together for 4 or 5 years and saying, you know what, you may not want to put all your eggs in one basket? Or is this season exactly why you do that? Because you are going to have injuries, and look, you still have 3 more years of this core group together. So you know what? You can chalk that one up to just life.
I think the perception of a lot of the fans, at least the ones who don't want to just punt the season and just give up, I think a lot of the perception is that this has been a significant outlier as far as injuries are concerned, right? Like some guys, Ozzy Albies has missed time in, I think, each of the last 3 seasons with some sort of injury. A lot of them have been fluky, foul ball off the foot, broken wrist on a tag play at second. But for the most part, this has been, in the eyes of many, the worst case scenario for Atlanta. I mean, you would expect to lose 1 or maybe 2 regulars to extended time. I don't think you'd expect 5 of your starting 9 to miss more than 2 months each. And so when that happens, it does expose the weaknesses of the farm system, like you alluded to. I haven't added in 2024 yet, but from 2019 to 2023, no team in baseball devoted a higher percentage of their bonus pool in the draft to pitching than Atlanta. Atlanta's the only team that paid more than 60% of their bonus pool dollars to pitching prospects. And the reason for that is they have this core locked in. Your next free agent opening in your starting 9 is 2026 when Orlando Arcia is up, and he has a club option for that year. I mean, so you have the ability to keep these guys, but like you alluded to, when you lose multiple of them, your depth options go away, right? You signed, you went out and you signed Luis Guillorme to be your infield backup, right? He had the option of playing second, playing third, playing short, but then you had multiple injuries in the infield. You signed Adam Duvall late in spring training to be a platoon 4th outfielder with Jared Kelenic, but then you lost Ronald Acuña Jr. and you lost Michael Harris. Like, it's just been a situation where this is very much an outlier result from a normal perspective. And so, yeah, you wish you had more talent in the farm system from a position player standpoint, but at the same time, you know that it would have been great to have this year, but it would have been extra next year, because how do you supplant? Who are you going to find is going to be better than Matt Olson at first base, or better than Austin Riley at third base, or better than Ronald Acuña Jr.? That's the hard part. So don't change your strategy based off of one bad year.
And there was that support, as you said, going out and grabbing those depth pieces, which is something that the Rockies didn't have. And in their own situation in 2023, you look and say, well, you lost your ace in Germán Marquez. He goes down, needs Tommy John. And Chris Bryant, who's just, you haven't really had much of him for 3 years.
Yeah.
You say, hey, that's in theory your best hitter and certainly your best pitcher. How are you able to rebound from that 100-loss season? And they're still dealing with that now. Speaking of those depth signings, I mean, Reynaldo López was one of those guys where he was signed and it was like, you know what, we might just be a long reliever. We might put him in the bullpen. And that turns out to be one of the more genius off-season moves, a guy who's probably going to get a couple back end, Cy Young Award votes this year. And we'll end up seeing him on Wednesday or on Thursday's game.
Yeah. I have to be completely honest. AA cooked on that. Alex Anthopoulos absolutely nailed that. I was skeptical that he would be able to start all year, right? Last 3 years of relief, 60-something innings every year. Like, there's no way he's going to be able to throw more than 100, 110 innings. But Atlanta was very aggressive at managing rest for the entire rotation early in the year. I mean, skipping days, adding in spot starters. They'd start every 6 or 7 days. At one point in late July, the five main Brave starters after Strider went down had made a combination of like 9 starts on regular rest all season. Atlanta was so aggressive with it. And now that they've stopped that, since Lopez came off the IL, they gave him 3 weeks when he had some little forearm tightness. He came back. He's looked great since then. I think that was a blessing in disguise. Since then, Atlanta's rattled off 15 consecutive starts of 3 runs or less by their starters. Like, just, it's absurd. But that Alex Anthopoulos thing, I think, is another part of this, where time and time again, he's been able to go out and find reinforcements for this team, and they've all worked out. Look at 2021. You lost Ronald Acuña Jr. You had a lot of injuries. You go out and you get 4 outfielders. You get Jock Peterson, Eddie Rosario, Adam Duvall, Jorge Soler, and every one of them has career performance down the stretch, and you win the World Series. And at this point, he's earned the benefit of the doubt. And Braves fans have that trust where we don't have to go get a bunch of position players in case something happens. We need to have realistic depth. You know, you have a utility infielder in AAA, you have utility infielder on the major league bench, maybe another guy you could grab if you need to. And then Alex Anthopoulos is, for the most part, not every time, but he's going to get more right than he gets wrong. And you look at Laureano, you look at, Merrifield, Urshela, like, he's getting these things right. And because of that, Atlanta is in the position they're in. And I don't think many teams can say we trust our GM to nail 85% of these moves.
They're also in the position that they're in because of a guy that I imagine no one had anticipated on being an MVP candidate. And going into the year, his club option for 2025 was probably going to be declined, but here he is now in conversation for the National League Triple Crown Award. And because of that, could he steal away an MVP award from Shohei Ohtani? I don't know, but Marcell Ozuna, no one saw that coming, right?
So he started off awful last year. He was batting .081 after the first month, and the calls were loud to just DFA him, eat the last year and a half of the deal. And Brian Snitker said, well, I see his at-bats. I see how hard he's hitting the ball. I see how hard he's working. We're going to stick with him. He had a huge series in Miami, and from that point on, he batted almost 300 the rest of the season. And then obviously this year has kept going. He is the reason offensively that Atlanta is anywhere near where they are. They've won with pitching this year. Don't get me wrong. The pitching has been the reason they have won as many games as they have. But the offensive production, he has carried this team from a home run, from an RBI, from just about every perspective, to the point now where you traded for Jorge Soler. You have Soler next year, but Atlanta's already talking about they're going to pick up the Ozuna option and they're going to stick Soler in the outfield for one more year because he's been so good. And you actually get a discount on his contract next year. He's making 1 year less on that club option. And that's the patience that I think Atlanta has had. And again, getting these moves right. They saw what a lot of us didn't, and they said his approach is good. He's had some bad luck. He's made some bad calls, and he's had some personal issues in the past, some bad judgment decisions that he's made. But he's helped the clubhouse a ton, and he has what it takes to get hot. And he's gotten hot and stayed hot now for a year and a half. And I think he deserves more credit. I don't know if he'll pass Shohei simply because Shohei's on a track to 50-50. All the stolen bases, I think, are the big differentiator there. But I mean, like you said, he's in contention for the Triple Crown. And while I don't think he'll catch Shohei in homers, like, he has a good chance of beating Luis Ariz in batting average and then beating everybody else in RBI as well. And that's just absurd from a guy who we thought would get DFA'd at the end of April last year.
And it speaks to how good Atlanta was in 2023 with the MVP and Acuña Jr. You had Olsen go over 50. I don't think anyone noticed. In fact, I'll admit, I didn't notice until right now looking it up. Marcell Ozuna hit 40 homers and hit exactly 100 RBI last year.
Yeah.
So I finished 19th in MVP voting. And like with numbers like that, you should be a lot higher. But, when you're third on the depth
after the first
chart,
month. Yeah. After the first month of batting .081, people wrote him off. And then he just went absurd since then. And that kind of was quiet because that first month was so bad.
All right. So he's not going to win comeback player of the year because he was actually pretty good last year. But more importantly, he's not going to win comeback player of the year because that is easily going to be Chris Sale. He's been phenomenal. He's probably the front runner right now for the Cy Young Award. I think I might lean a little bit more towards the guy with the innings, and a couple extra starts. I think Zach Wheeler was robbed, a couple years ago against Corbin Burns, but still he's going to be there. 2.58 ERA, leads the National League. 197 strikeouts, only trails Dylan Cease by 4. 15 wins, leads the National League. We haven't had a pitching Triple Crown winner in a full 162 game season since 2011. That was both Verlander and Kershaw did it in the AL and NL respectively. So this is a huge season for Chris Sale, and he's going to have an opportunity to add to that on Tuesday against the Rockies.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Chris Sale at spring training down in Northport, and he swore up and down all offseason, the press conference after they signed him, when I talked to him then, press availability, everything, that he is the healthiest he has been since 2018. He just dealt with so many injuries during his time in Boston, and he told us he was going to do this. He didn't say he was going to win the Cy Young, but he said, I feel like I can get back to my early career performance, and he absolutely has. The velocity's been better than it's been the last few years. The slider has been more dangerous. Chris Sale is on a streak right now, and I don't want to jinx this, Braves fans. If something happens, don't come back at me on this. In his last 14 starts, he's not allowed more than 2 earned runs. He has a grand total of 3 starts this year where he's allowed 3 or more earned runs, and 2 of them were in the month of April. It's been absurd. He genuinely is looking like it was early career Cy Young, 6 or 7 consecutive Cy Young runner-up, top 5 finishes. And another example of Alex Anthopoulos absolutely nailing it. He traded Vaughn Grissom, who did not work out in the infield for Atlanta, was going to get moved to left field. And he traded him straight up for Chris Sale and money. He got Chris Sale's salary for this year covered, and then immediately signed him to a 1-year extension with a club option on it. And then Chris Sale goes out and has a potentially a Cy Young season after that. And it's another data point where Atlanta, for some reason, just understands the guys that are, and I think Rockies fans can speak to this with the trade for Pierce Johnson last year. The Braves as an organization just understand guys that are able to perform better than they were in their current situation for whatever reason. I'd argue it's one of the core competencies of Atlanta is they can go find a guy who is struggling. They can acquire him however it is, trade, free agency, whatever, and make him significantly better than he was. And I think that's part of the winning formula for Atlanta. And I don't really think that's something you can just say, we're going to do this, but they figured something out where they can do that.
I also just remembered as you were talking, the last time Chris Sale faced the Rockies in 2019 at Fenway Park, in 7 innings, he struck out 17. So Chris Sale is going to have himself a little bit of fun on Tuesday night. I'm curious. I've been looking into this, and I know he's a new Brave, so right. You might not have done a deep dive, but it got me thinking: is Chris Sale going to make the Baseball Hall of Fame? He's an 8-time All-Star, over 2,000 strikeouts, only has 135 wins, but we know that I think 200 wins is now the new 300 wins. Does have a .619 winning percentage. 3.06 career ERA. Keep in mind, a lot of that was done entirely in the AL when they were the only league that had a DH. On the downside, according to JAWS, Jay Jaffe's system for win shares of, ranking players all time, he's 84th. So he's behind Andy Pettitte, Mark Burley, Cole Hamels, barely ahead of Roy Oswalt, but does have a World Series win with Boston in 2018. In fact, came on to get the final out in Game 5 against the Dodgers.
That was cool.
That was a huge moment, right? 7 times he's finished in the top 6 in the Cy Young Award voting. Runner-up once, but I think winning the Cy Young Award in 2024 could really be huge for his Cooperstown case.
I think that's where I am as well. As long as the voters are willing to adjust and understand 300 wins is not realistic in modern baseball anymore, as long as they're willing to make that adjustment, then to me, winning the Cy Young this year gives him the ultimate award, right? The ultimate individual award. He has that moment, that Hall of Fame moment that every guy has. In this case, he has the final out of the World Series there. And he has that peak, that significant 6-7 year peak where he can arguably say he's one of the best pitchers or best players in the game. And so if he can repeat this age 35 season 1 or 2 more times, not saying he has to win a Cy Young, but still, ERA under 3, contending for one of the best pitchers in baseball, I think that he is a Hall of Famer. And fun fact, I think he'd be the second pitching Hall of Famer to have had Tommy John surgery. John Smoltz, to my knowledge, is the only one as of right now who's had Tommy John and came back to make the Hall of Fame. Chris Sale would be the second. I'm sure somebody between now and then will get voted in who had Tommy John, but he'd be the second.
Yeah, we went pretty quickly from 300 being the standard to now 200. So,
yeah. I mean,
that will be interesting.
That's just the game has changed. Like I think that's
sure.
Everybody kind of agrees that you're not going to see 300 wins anymore. It's just not going to happen unless you're some dude who manages to vulture a ton of them, in some sort of fashion. But to me, the peak and the individual awards, I think, kind of outweigh a lot of that. He was arguably one of the best pitchers in the American League for 6-7 years between Chicago and Boston. And then to come back and have a late career resurgence, if he wins a Cy Young, he has the All-Star moment or the World Series moment. I feel like there's a strong case. Might not be first ballot, definitely won't be unanimous, but I think he'd get in.
Yeah, I want to get to the series preview. I have many more talking points. Yeah. So we could be on the quicker side on this.
Plenty of time. You're good.
Raisel Iglesias. Why aren't more people talking about him? He had 2 more scoreless innings, Sunday Night Baseball in Philadelphia, no less. 21 1/3 scoreless inning streak going into tonight's game, longest in the National League. Opponents are hitting under 100 off him with runners in scoring position. And among pitchers with as many appearances since his Braves debut in August of 2022, his 1.72 ERA is the best in the major leagues.
I think it's because he's not that prototypical closer. He's not coming in like a Manuel Clase or Duran and firing 101 miles an hour, right? He's a guy that, fastball, changeup, right? That's what he does. But he's hit a new level this year of dominance. He had a streak. It was broken. I actually think it may have been broken by your Rockies, but he had a streak. Maybe it was the Phillies. He had a streak of 30 plus consecutive batters retired. He threw a hidden perfect game. He struck out 30 something, or he retired 30 something consecutive batters without allowing a base runner at all. And I think he doesn't fit the archetype that you think of as a dominant closer because he's not getting the strikeouts. 8.8 strikeouts per 9 innings this year. It's one of the lower marks for him in his career, but he's also walking less than 2 guys per 9 innings. And I think he's allowed maybe 2 homers all season. He's just been incredibly dominant, but he does it in an atypical way. And so because of that, he's not in the list of the best closers in baseball. But if you said I need a dude for the 9th inning, he's in my top 5. And against Philly, he pitched the 9th in the 10th inning. And apparently he asked to come back out for the 11th.
Wow.
That's been the big thing is he's just been so dominant and so willing to do whatever he needed to do for the team to win. He doesn't care about the strikeout numbers. He doesn't care about his stats. His goal is to get the wins, is to get the saves, and this team to win. And I think that's all you can really ask for from a closer. And they have another year of contractual control of him. He was another guy that they got. He was underperforming in LA when they got him from the Angels. It was a salary dump. And since then, he's been fantastic.
Yeah, another stroke of genius for AA, for sure. Max Fried is going to be a free agent after this year. Knowing nothing about the specific situation, but knowing, how there's been a lot of good young starters in the pipeline. We've seen a couple of them already. They haven't all been able to stay healthy. My guess would be that they probably won't be bringing Max Fried back. I think he might be a Boris guy as well. What do you think might happen this offseason?
So with Max Fried, Braves fans kind of assume that he's going to be gone. If you look at the situation of what Atlanta does with their contracts, their 2 main trends are, and I think he's a CAA guy, but the 2 main trends are Atlanta likes to sign their extensions to guys when they still have team control. They sign those extensions early. And Atlanta has not paid more than $22 million a year AAV on a long-term deal under Alex Anthopoulos. They did a $23 million 1-year deal for Josh Donaldson in 2019, I think, but they've not gone over $22 million a year on any of their deals. Not Olsen, not Riley, not Strider, nobody. And the fact that he's made it all the way to his walk year and has not yet signed that extension, and the fact that while we've offered bigger deals, the Freddie Freeman deal was reportedly, I think, 24 or 25. The Aaron Nola deal in the offseason, the one they offered him was reportedly 25. The fact they've not signed anybody to that has Braves fans feeling like he's going to be gone. the fact that he's a California guy and the Braves did just lose another California guy, Freddie Freeman, to the Dodgers, makes Braves fans feel like he's going to go back home as well. But Braves fans have operated on the assumption that Max Fried is leaving, to the point where some fans who wanted to give up on the season after all the injuries actually suggested trading Max Fried at the trade deadline, despite Atlanta being, in the postseason. If the season ended that day, they were saying over the summer, trade Max Fried, get whatever you can get because he's going to walk in free agency. And if he does, you take the comp pick and you move on.
All right, you're cooking here, Lindsay. So we're going to keep cooking with fire. I'm curious about the 2015-2017 Atlanta rebuild, because that's the one that really doesn't get a ton of conversation, partially because it definitely wasn't done for the same length of time as the Astros and Cubs did for four plus years. It was only 3. Atlanta also didn't end up losing 100 games in any of those seasons. But what they were able to do at that time, leading into going into the new ballpark was, they dealt a young guy in his prime and Justin Upton. You got back Max Fried. Craig Kimbrell and BJ Upton went for a package of players and they got a draft pick for it. They ended up taking Austin Riley. And then you got Jason Hayward getting flipped for Shelby Miller, who was then flipped for the guy that was the first overall pick in the 2015 MLB draft, Dansby Swanson. And yeah, maybe that's more of chalking it up to Tony La Russa and Dave Stewart in Arizona making a foolish move than saying, oh, Atlanta, they're genius. Anyone would love to have the first overall pick only a year after they were taken. But that rebuild really has catapulted them here into 6, possibly 7 with this year, consecutive postseason appearances. You win the World Series in 2021. And that was all because of that sidestep rebuild in 2015-2017.
Yeah. A forgotten part of that Dansby Swanson deal. You also got Ender Inciarte. Won 2 Gold Gloves, was your starting center fielder for a few years until, in essence, you were ready to move on to Michael Harris. But for me, it's been the ability, I think, for Atlanta to scout and look at players differently than a lot of other guys. Ronald Acuña Jr. didn't get a big bonus as an international free agent. Austin Riley was being looked at out of high school as a pitcher. Atlanta wanted to take him as a position player, and he's become what he's become. And so it kind of goes back to the evaluation of players and the understanding of what guys are good at and how we can make them better. And I think Atlanta, even now, they've continued to take guys a little bit outside of the normal archetype that you would think about and get quality production out of them. Spencer Strider was a 6 foot tall, just had Tommy John, mediocre starting pitcher at Clemson. He was fine. He wasn't bad. They turned him into the most dominant strikeout artist in baseball, right? You look at a guy like Spencer Schwellenbach this year, who replaced Strider in the rotation. He was a shortstop at Nebraska, who was the closer in his draft year. They made him into one of the most promising young starters in baseball. There's something about the organization. It's persisted through multiple GMs, through President's Baseball Operations, farm directors, where they understand what makes a player good from a talent perspective and how to build on that. The scouting, the evaluation, the development, and then something that everybody has talked about who comes to Atlanta. I think about these DFA players who all joined the team midseason. The environment, the clubhouse, the organization as a whole is, in my mind, immeasurably different than a lot of other places. Everybody talks about how special it is to play for the Braves, this historic organization, and how supportive the clubhouse is, the organization is. I don't think that there's I think there's a reason why all of these long-term deals that were signed early, all of these guys offer up 1% of their contract to the Atlanta Braves Foundation. We've been told, the media's been told, that's not something that the team dictates or requires. Not everybody does that. But everybody that's signed long-term Atlanta has done. There's just something different about the organization that we can't quantify. That's the frustrating thing, is we can measure bat speed now, right? We can measure all kinds of amazing things. We can't figure out what this is that's special about Atlanta, but they've nailed a lot of their prospect development, their scouting, their talent acquisition, and it's persisted across GMs and president of baseball operations. And I don't know why. Like, we don't know for sure what it is, but there's something different about the organization. That's what's tough. We just don't know what it is.
It's incredible. Yeah. Yeah, who is it, or what's that intangible that they
Yeah,
see that they're able to pinpoint and say, no, this person is going to figure it out, because that again, that's what separates an organization like Atlanta and one like the Rockies, where they haven't been able to pinpoint those guys, and even when they go out and acquire a superstar like a Chris
Chris
Bryant,
Bryant.
it ends up breaking down, and you say, oh man, it's maybe there is an intangible there, but there is something that we missed as a part of that equation. And so that's, and again, maybe it could also be that they're learning from the whole John Coppolella situation too, because that's the other interesting piece is going from the 3 bad years of 90 plus losses from 15 to 17, and then 6 consecutive postseason berths. And you've got, one of the larger baseball scandals. I don't know if that's a major sports scandal, because it's certainly not sexy in any way, where everybody wants to talk about, scouting in Latin America like that. It just lacks, I guess, some kind of appeal. But that's big in the industry for someone to get a lifetime ban, but then to immediately turn around and kind of rebound from that is quite impressive.
And I think that is like it kind of goes with what I just said. Like, they nailed the evaluation of Alex Anthopoulos too, bringing in that GM at that specific time. The John Capella thing, talking to people around the team at that time, morale was terrible. And what he did was awful. For those of you who don't maybe know that whole scandal, long story short, John Capella was funneling money to secretly sign players in international free agency. And he was skimming money off of those deals. So he was illegally funneling money to kids, to 15 and 16-year-old kids. But he was also funneling money away from those deals to pay their trainers, to pay other people who were helping him do this illegal thing. So that's why he was banned from baseball for life. He deserved it. He has admitted he deserves it. He's moved on. I don't know how many organizations would recover from that in the time that Atlanta did. I think some of that's luck. Obviously, you had some talent in the pipeline by then that you didn't lose from that scandal. Most of the players you lost from that scandal have not panned out. Kevin Maitan was the biggest name out of that, and I don't think he ever made the majors.
Yeah, that's the other piece too, right? Like,
yeah,
morale is down big time, but then all those guys you signed, that's just gone. That's a whole year. It's almost like an entire draft class that you have now lost.
And Atlanta's strategy in national free agency has kind of shifted now. And after that, a lot of it was focused on quantity. We have to build up the system again. And some of the lean years you saw after the rebuild in the farm system, some of those were because you promoted a ton of guys. You promoted Austin Riley. Like, you promoted a ton of guys out of the system. But also, you had so many less prospects because you lost an entire international class plus some. I think it was like 23 prospects that you lost from that signing scandal. And after the farm system kind of rebuilt a little bit, Atlanta adjusted their international free agency strategy, and now they are trying to find superstars. They are going out. They're usually one of the top 5 highest individual bonus amounts in international free agency. But that was a situation where they went for quantity, and they tried to scout and find gems like Ronald Acuña Jr., like Ozzy Albies, not big bonus guys. And then after that, they adjusted and they said, we have this core locked in place. It's going to be hard to find somebody good enough to replace them. So we're going to go out and get one of the best prospects in national free agency every year, hoping that one of them pans out. None of them have yet. You still have time. I think the oldest one of them is 19, maybe. And it's just, they've consistently, it feels like, been a little bit ahead of the curve on all of the major developments across scouting, across development, across talent acquisition. And again, something about the organization, it's not all AA, some of it's before him, but something about this organization is just different. And I consider myself lucky to be able to cover a team that is arguably competent at just about everything. I can't really find many areas where the Braves are just awful, right?
It's fascinating too, because the Rockies have the exact opposite approach, where they do want quantity over quality, because hey, you put all your eggs in that one basket, and if something happens to that player, you've got nothing. So you want a bunch of really good players, and because they have so many depth issues, they're not in that boat where Atlanta's, like you said, you need an impact player to really move the needle, because you already have really good guys at every spot. Hey, we have to get some of those top tier international prospects, and the Rockies are going the other way on that.
Yeah, it's a floor versus ceiling argument, right? When you're not a very good team, and the Rockies recently have not been a very good team from a win-loss perspective. You need to raise the talent level in the organization and find better options of what you have at the major league level. Later, as you get really good, you have to raise the ceiling because you have to be able to replace a guy you already have. And we've seen other teams, I feel like that strategy is a little bit harder to make work. And I think about the Angels draft in 2021. They took nothing but pitchers because the talent level pitching-wise in the organization was dreadful. They took, I think, 20 of their 21 pitchers signed, or 19 of their 20, whatever, almost all college guys. A couple of them have made the majors. None of them have been impact performers. And it was something where they were just trying to raise the floor on pitching as a whole in the system and at the major league level. And it feels like that's a little bit harder to make work, but you can do it. And we see some of these guys the Rockies have signed. Ezequiel Tovar came up and struggled a little bit, and then he's been pretty good since then. And it's like some of these guys have worked out, but some of these guys also, there's a ton of outfielders like Zach Veen who can't seem to get healthy and make the majors. And I think it's a flawed strategy if your best of that quantity can't quite live up to the hype. And I think that's unfortunate, again, for baseball, because we want the Rockies to be good.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, being behind the trends has definitely been a common theme for the Rockies. If you take from analytics, whatever it was, I think it was like about 5 years ago, there was a media availability, and Bud Black was like, yeah, we might be 5-10 years, behind everybody else. And I don't think they've really made up that gap at all.
That's a long time in baseball.
Yeah. And that's why, and one of the best, it's not for Rockies fans best, but one of the most interesting fun facts tied to the Rockies and tied to the Braves is the fact that Atlanta has more NL West pennants since 1993 than the Colorado Rockies. So that's what we're dealing with here with these two clubs, right?
I love the old divisions and how they just didn't make any sense. Yeah, that's the Braves are playing the Giants in San Francisco for the pennant in the West. And sure, okay. No, makes no sense.
I mean, you guys are going to have it easy depending on what the reshuffling is going to be with expansion. If you're with Tampa, Miami, and then, Nashville, more likely than not, like an expansion team, that could be a very easy division for a while.
It has the potential to work out for Atlanta. I will say, and nobody in the organization has gone on the record about this, but I will say they would much rather see a team in the Carolinas than see a team in Nashville. They don't obviously want either one. If there's a East Coast expansion team, they want it to be Montreal, because part of the success, and it's kind of anecdotal, but part of the success of the Atlanta Braves in the last decade or so, these are all of the players who grew up in the age of TBS. And everywhere in the Southeast, you could watch the Atlanta Braves, right? I grew up in Florida. I watched the Atlanta Braves. And so many of their players and some of these guys that signed these long-term deals, Matt Olson's from Atlanta, Michael Harris is from Atlanta, Spencer Strider's from Tennessee, Austin Riley's from Mississippi. So many of these guys watched the Braves growing up. And so they're willing to take less money because they dreamed of this. This was literally as a child when they went out in the yard and played, they dreamed about playing for the Atlanta Braves. And so organizationally, you can see why they would not want Nashville to be the expansion team, because a couple hundred miles north of Atlanta, that is right there. That's your new geographic rival, but that eats into the largest television distribution network in the country of what the Braves have, the largest area that the Braves have.
Yeah, Charlotte being also is about 4 hours away drive-wise. So, yeah, either one of those is not going to be great. MLB is going to want to split that up. This could be a good off-season topic. I mean, Las Vegas, we know, is going to be there. If they don't, the A's don't officially go there. Sacramento might be in the conversation.
It might be Sacramento.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting going forward. All right, let's talk about this series. We got Kyle Freeland against Chris Sale, two lefties on Tuesday night. On Wednesday, Bradley Blaylock against Charlie Morton. 17-plus year age difference between those two starters. I'm looking forward to seeing what the stats come out from that. And then Austin Gomber versus Reynaldo Lopez. You touched on it before, how good the the Braves starters have been. They've recorded 808 strikeouts this season, most in baseball, and they're 203 strikeouts in the month of August, the most by any rotation in a single month since the Astros in 2018. And it's the first time in their franchise history in the modern era crossing the 200 strikeout plateau. So the Rockies may go on to make some dubious history this week in terms of Ks.
I think to that point, another reason why the Rockies may struggle, again, I'm trying to hedge this for Braves fans here, is I personally do not like how the schedule sets up where you face a team twice in a 2 or 3 week span, right? We just faced Philly twice in 2 weeks. But neither of these 3 pitchers pitched in Colorado in that 4-game series. Sale and Morton didn't throw. Lopez was on the IL at the time. And so I believe this is the first time all season that Rockies will see these 3 guys. And to your point earlier, I think you said Sale hasn't faced the Rockies since 2019. And there's obviously a lot of new faces on this team. And so they're kind of going into an unknown here. And I think that works in Atlanta's favor. I mentioned this earlier. They're also on that streak of 3 or less runs allowed. I want to say it's now 17 or 18.
21.
Sorry.
Now
yeah.
21.
21 consecutive
and
starts.
when was the last time they gave it more than 3 runs? Against the Colorado Rockies.
Against Colorado Rockies, yeah. But the wild thing to me is the Braves had in the 90s one of the greatest rotations in baseball history, right? Greg Maddux, John Smoltz, Tom Glavine. They won 4 or 5 consecutive Cy Youngs. A Braves pitcher led baseball for 4 straight years in wins, and one of those was Danny Neagle. Like, he outperformed those 3 guys, and those guys never did this. But like you said, the last time it happened, though, Colorado, Braves fans are hoping the difference here is that this series is not also in Colorado. This series is at home, and this team has played. It feels like they do better at home. Also, a really weird stat: Atlanta has one of the worst records in baseball against teams under 500 this year. They have been one of the better teams in baseball against teams over 500, and they've been one of the worst against teams under 500. We don't understand why. That's really weird. I don't know how statistically significant it is, but it's out there. And so Braves fans are a little bit nervous simply because, like I said, you don't know what to expect from the Rockies on the road. The last time your offense, your pitching staff did get hit a little bit, it was that Rockies series, and they've underperformed against teams under 500. So Braves, no Braves fan I've talked to said, yeah, we're going to sweep this series. A lot of them are assuming 2-1. The Rockies will find a win somewhere simply because there's just so many things that Braves fans don't have any certainty about in this series. Like, you go to Miami soon. They're confident they'll beat Miami. They're not confident about Colorado.
The Rockies are always suspect in that way. Well, this is not going to make you feel any better. The Rockies do play well against teams over 500, not against teams under 500. So go figure. But
32 and 49. Yeah, it's better than I thought it was going to be.
Well, you could feel better about knowing that since 2019, only the Dodgers, of course, only the Dodgers have a better record than Atlanta in September and October. They're playing 600 ball since the start of 2019. So now this could be their time of the year. Who's the guy that's heating up? Because I'll tell you this. I've told it to people from all the other beats. Jake Cave. You do not want to mess with Jake Cave. He starts the rallies. He ended up breaking up Zach Eflin's perfect game in the 6th inning on Sunday. He's that guy. You go, all right, Jake Cave's up. I can probably take a break, catch my breath. Not always the case. Who is that guy for Atlanta's lineup? It probably is strange to say Matt Olson, but he's definitely been a lot better since the start of August. But is it Jared Kelenic? Who's that sneaky guy at the bottom of the lineup that when they come up, don't take your foot off the gas?
Real quick on the Jake Cave note, he had a 3-run homer in that Braves collapse on that Sunday. They are not looking past Jake Cave. Do not worry about that. No. Ramon Laureano, DFA'd by the Guardians. In the last 30 days, so 25 games, he's batting .329 with a .924 OPS. We don't know either. It's another data point about he was DFA'd by the Guardians because he was doing so poorly. And he comes over here and he's batting over 300 since he joined the team. He's almost 330 in the last month. Ozuna's been hot, right? Olsen has gotten hotter that same stretch, 267 and 7 home runs. But Ramon Laureano is the one I think you have to watch out for, simply because it feels like teams consistently both underappreciate his arm, which we know is fantastic, and what he can do offensively. I mean, he's got 8 extra base hits in that span. He's got 11 RBI, and he's usually batting 6th or so. Not a position where you worry about a dude cranking a home run or really hurting you. But if Olsen, Ozuna, those guys ahead of him can get on, he absolutely can drive them in, whether it's a home run or an extra base hit.
All right. Before we wrap it up, do want to mention it is the final week for low A and high A for Rockies affiliates, for all affiliates. It's Fresno's final week. Spokane, it's their final week of the regular season, and then comes the playoffs next week. So there'll be a lot to talk about that. You'll get your minor league minutes each and every day here on the Rockies Insider. I know the Rome Braves got rebranded to the Rome Emperors. What was your thought on that for Atlanta's rebranding?
I absolutely love it. I got a Rome Emperors hat right here. I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic branding. They didn't go with some centurion in a toga. They went with an emperor penguin as the mascot. It really was received well by the fan base. And the AA affiliate is moving from Mississippi to Columbus, Georgia for next season. They announced their new branding this Friday. Atlanta has brought in all of their affiliates in state. Nobody's more than a 2 or 3 hour drive from Atlanta. But no, the Emperors, fantastic branding. It's great. The green jackets, the Augusta green jackets, the mascot is obviously an insect, but the colors are green, like Masters green and all of that. The Braves have really nailed it with these brandings, and I'm curious to see what AA is going to be.
Gwinnett Stripers. I hadn't heard about the move. I love all things minor league, so I'm definitely gonna have to look that up. Do they have like a finalist of like the final 4 names they're going with, or they're just gonna reveal it?
No fan input, no polls, completely secret. They know what it is. I have an email in my inbox that came in while we were recording about the media availability for Friday and some of the pre-work stuff. So I probably have the answer in my email that's embargoed until Friday, but they have asked nobody what their opinion, like they have not asked for public input. They have not done a poll. It's going to be a complete surprise. And people are dying to know what this is because there's so many possibilities you can do in Columbus. There's an Army base there. There's a lot of history from other teams being there. Tons of options. Nobody knows what it's going to be.
You know what it's not going to be? Columbus Christophers. Guaranteed. Although, it was floated. It was floated. Someone had it. Hey, look, everybody, just empty out the tank. What's the suggestion that you've got?
I genuinely had not thought of that. That was really good. I wondered if they were going to do something to tie into the military theme. One of the Army Ranger schools is here at the fort. It used to be called Fort Benning. It's called something else now. But I wonder if they do like the Columbus Rangers, something like that. That was kind of my thought. But there is a Texas Rangers, and I think they'd be worried about the overlap there. So I'm curious to see what it is. Lots of different directions they could go. It's probably going to be animal themed. A lot of them have been so far, but I'm curious to see what this will be. I had not thought about the Christophers though. That is funny. I do think they probably don't want to have a person as a mascot though. I think that was one of the things that was told to us about the Emperor's rebrand. They wanted the penguin over a person in a costume, so they didn't have to worry about replacing that person later down the road.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. It's the Fountain City. I don't know if you knew that. Columbus, the Fountain City. So maybe that's
the Columbus Fountains. I got nothing here. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's also whitewater rafting. The Atlanta Olympics did their whitewater kayaking and stuff in Columbus. There's whitewater rafting through the middle of downtown. The river goes right through downtown. So maybe they use something with the rapids. I don't know.
Which means the mascot is going to be holding an oar as a bat. I think that one we can lock.
We nailed it.
We nailed
it. I'm going to email them right now and say, hey guys, it's not too late to change this.
Yeah, we nailed 5% of this rebrand coming up. Lindsay, go ahead and plug away. This has been a lot of fun. I can't wait to talk with you again already. But yeah, go ahead. Let people know where they can find all your great content.
Absolutely. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball, kind of the hub for everything. The podcast, Braves Today podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. The writing we have is at bravestoday.com. We keep the same name for everything. And then also, if you just want general MLB news, we have a daily MLB recap show every morning called First Pitch, wherever you get your podcasts.
Nice. Yeah, check that out. At Patrick D. Lyons, at Patrick D. Lyons MLB on the socials, at Rockies_insider. Please go ahead and follow on the YouTube channel, leave a review on the podcast. Lindsay, appreciate all the momentum you've given me today, but unfortunately, as I like to say, momentum is only as good as my next show. So I'll talk to you all tomorrow.